Now, tabling his 2026 national budget speech in Parliament yesterday, Minister of Finance Enoch Godongwana announced that government has decided to withdraw the 20 billion rand in tax increases provisionally included in the May 2025 budget. Now, with the social grants allocated 292.8 billion rand, while 700 million rand has been allocated for the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies. Minister Godongwana also painted a picture of our current reality, saying that weak public infrastructure and the recent outbreak of foot and mouth disease continue to weigh heavily on economic activity, and these also pose risks to the country's economic outlook. But for more, we are joined now by the Minister of Finance, Enoch Godongwana. He joins us virtually. Minister, good morning, and thanks for making the time to speak to us once more here on Morning Live.
Good morning to you, Sakina, and SABC viewers.
Minister, many people in reaction to yesterday's speech, and of course noting there has been a mixed reaction, but many were saying in the lead up to the speech they were hoping for a boring budget, and many would say they got that. But how would you describe the budget that you delivered yesterday?
The budget we delivered yesterday is, in my view, not boring. The budget we delivered, yes, I provide a number of things which are useful for South Africans. The first one, as you have indicated, we have provided tax reliefs to South Africans, which means putting money back into their pockets. Despite that, we've tried to meet some of these social obligations, such as social grants. We are trying to attend to some of the things afflicting your institution, SABC. We putting a lot of money on infrastructure. We have announced an impressive program moving forward on the different social infrastructure programs, which means that it's a budget which is giving attention to some of the basic needs of our people.
And, you know, starting with the outlook regarding tax, and are there measures to broaden that tax base rather than increase it in the years and months ahead, Minister?
Every Minister of Finance in the world would like to broaden the tax base than increase taxes. That's an ideal situation. That also assumes that your economy is functioning properly and is growing, and therefore the tax base is also growing. In our situation, we've got the opposite. Our economy has not been growing satisfactorily for more than a decade. And for that reason, its impact on revenue was very, very, very negative in that sense. So, but at the same time, you've got huge pressures on spending pressures. So you've got to balance all of these things.
Indeed, you do. And speaking of, you know, the growth, economic growth that has been lagging, what is being done in terms of structural reforms to try and accelerate that? Because that would, I would imagine, have a knock-on effect on everything else that South Africans are generally complaining about.
You will recall we've had more than a decade and a half of electricity shortages, including load shedding. Then that in itself has had an impact on the economy. And recently we've got serious logistic challenges in terms of rail, and that also has had an impact in particular on the export sectors of our economy. I can go on and on and on. Crime is also a major factor. You will recall that in construction, where these people who call themselves, whatever they call themselves, would come in and disturb construction activities. All of those things combined have had, on the domestic economy, has had a huge negative impact.
And of course, those people colloquially referred to as the construction mafia. And if we look at the construction sector, who are seen as one of those who will be pivotal in kickstarting that economic growth that we so desire, you know, the allocations that are being made there, how are you ensuring or even ring fencing if needs be, so that we know that the money is going to be spent for whichever reason it is allocated, that it is not misspent or underspent?
Let me just give an example. We highlight the challenges we face in municipalities where we allocate money for disaster, for instance, in some municipalities, as we did in 2024, and you find that in 2025, when you make the allocation to the same municipalities, the 2024 allocation have not been utilized. The reason really is not because there's corruption, it's that the capacity of these municipalities to be able to deliver on these programs. In some cases, they require specific skills, but because of the nature of the location, those skills you won't find in those areas. In that sense, we're beginning to say we've got to find delivery mechanism rather than taking money back to treasury. An example, we're saying if there's a district municipality which is effective, we should be able to utilize that district municipality. We should be able to use the quota institution called MISA and other accredited delivery institutions to support municipalities. I'm just citing that as one example. You will see that the amount provided to municipalities for infrastructure over the next 3 years is 205 billion. We would like to see that 205 billion being utilized effectively and having an impact on the economy.
And you used the example in your speech yesterday, Minister, about a bridge perhaps that would have been washed away during one of these natural disasters. And for South Africans, of course, it is the local sphere of government where they experience government in all of its facets. And if that bridge is not rebuilt, regardless of the fact that there's no capacity at municipal levels, people don't care for those excuses, because the question then becomes, why isn't there capacity? And even if there isn't capacity, then surely the other levels of government, as you now indicated, should have stepped in. Why isn't this happening? And what sort of mechanisms are you going to build in to hold people accountable so that that service delivery actually happens?
Let me just demonstrate the structural problem for you. If you take out of the 38,000 engineers that we have in this country, there's 38,000 engineers, 46% of those engineers will probably be sitting in the Gauteng province. And the remainder spreading between Western Cape and KZN, Durban and Cape Town. What that means is that if you want to fix a bridge in Kala, where I come from, you have got to have an engineer, preferably in Queenstown, because you're not likely to find some resident engineer sitting in Kala in any event. So what that means, you have got to, what we're suggesting now, we now understand the problem, is that given that the district municipality, Chris sits in Queenstown, and there are engineers there, it would be useful for the district municipality to deploy the resources to help the municipalities, local municipalities such as that. I'm just making an example.
And if we look at that allocation to the municipalities, is it sufficient, Minister, in your view, given the allocations that go to national and provincial government structures? And also, if you look at the plight from the municipalities, they've been crying. They have debtors books that they know they probably will never be able to recover any of the money in there, if anything at all. And then they also are decrying the mechanism, or should I say, the equation that is being used for allocations, because they feel that they are not getting enough money at municipal level where the service delivery challenges are met by residents.
Let me start by referring to the point where you say they complain that the money is not enough. You know, you are working, Sakina, and I can't recall anybody who's employed who said my salary is enough. So I can tell you now, sitting there, you're probably saying your salary is not enough. Now, it's the nature of how economic activity works. So no one says my share is correct. You'll see in National Department, despite the fact that of the total national raised revenue, they get 48% of that. All of them still complain that I'm cutting their budgets. Now, that's the first problem, is that there's never not going to be enough. The question is how effective are we using those resources? And secondly, the equitable share uses functions. If we had to look at the number of functions sitting in provinces and national, most of them are what I call labor intensive. If we had to look at education and health that sit in provinces, they employ more people in education. You need teachers. You don't need machines. You need teachers. In health, you need nurses. You need all of these people. So by their very nature, they are labor intensive and therefore divide more resources. A similar thing that happens in Natal. You've got the defense force, you've got the police, you've got a whole correctional service, you've got all of those departments that have got major functions and are labor intensive. And that therefore consume more resources than you would at a municipal level. Some municipalities, metros, have got, in addition to this allocation, revenue raising capacities, which in my view are not yet necessarily utilized effectively.
And with regard to their finances and the AG reports, you mentioned in your speech 63% of municipalities across the country facing financial distress, speaking to the point that we're addressing now, but the proportion of clean audits remaining unacceptably low, according to the Auditor General. Again, in terms of, just monitoring what is happening with these municipalities and the capacity they have to actually spend these funds, how is Treasury going to monitor those allocations?
We do. On a quarterly basis, we publish what is called Section 71 reports, quarterly. The problem is, if the media were to help us, every time these reports are published, to tell South Africans how the money is being spent by municipalities, that would be useful, so that South Africans know what is happening. From our side as Treasury, we do the monitoring and publish reports every quarter. So that's the first point. The second point, it is easy to complain that you don't have money. Now, you can't. If you don't have money, you must also spend the money and utilize the money according to, let me put it differently. Tailor your expenditure to meet your revenues. Now, you get into municipalities, they're sitting in a council. They make a decision to spend money they don't have, is what we call unfunded mandates. Of the 257 municipalities, about 175 of them have taken decisions like that. So you are likely, that is a recipe for disaster.
So what are the accountability mechanisms? You're correct about the reportage. We speak about what the AG reports on an annual basis, but surely there has to be keener, stricter accountability that needs to be had. We know the AG's office has been strengthened in terms of at least giving it, some teeth to bite, but clearly it is not enough because, as you say, at the very least, these municipalities continue to adopt unfunded budgets that are not sustainable. So surely more needs to be done, Minister.
The problem we should, understand is that our constitution is crafted in such a manner that it protects the abuse of power by the national sphere. It has built checks and balances. In other words, I can't simply rock up in a municipality and say, you're not doing things properly, and so on and so on. There are constitutional procedures I've got to follow. That in itself is a difficult task because it's marred in political difficulties. So if I want to intervene in a municipality, first the province must prove that the province did not intervene and it did not do it successful in terms of Section 139. And then when I do so in terms of Section 139, there's always going to be a number of accusation of abuse of power and so on. We've got to tread very carefully in those interventions.
Minister, I just want to move to, social distress that for many South Africans is deepening on a weekly, daily, monthly basis. And with the future of the SRD, can you speak to us about the SRD grant? Because I remember maybe about 2 years ago, the then Minister of Social Development, Lindiwe Sisulu, spoke about the basic income grant in that they were at a stage where they were simply looking at the modalities for the implementation of a basic income grant. What has happened to that?
No one is opposed to a basic income grant. The question is, do we have sufficient resources to provide a basic income grant? If you ask me, the answer is no. I made the point yesterday that, for instance, on the existing grants, I would have liked to have improved them better, but the resources do not allow me, whether it's an old age grant, child support grant, and so on. I would have also liked to increase the SRD grant. The last increase I did was at 20 rand on that 350. I would like to have increased it, but the resource envelope is such that I cannot. The truth of the matter, there are three ways in which you can fund government programs. The first one is borrowing. But there's a limit in how far you can go into borrowing. We are already now our debt to GDP is so high in such a manner that it's consuming more or resources than education, for instance, the debt service cost. So you must increase taxes. The dilemma we face is that most South Africans in this environment are not keen on tax increases for a variety of reasons. Some are understandable. If people cannot see value for money in their taxes, there's likely to be a resistance, which I'm sympathetic to that view. If the perception is that whatever tax rand we collect is not used effectively, there's corruption, there's all of those things, citizens would be justifiably not be willing to accept tax increases. But tax increases are another instruments of making sure that you can fund some of the programs. So that's how government fund programs. They're funding programs via taxes. So the next one is cutting expenditure. Now, that in itself is also a difficult one because you can cut up to an extent. It's no longer serving its purpose.
And many people, of course, many critics against the austerity measures, which brings about that balance between, stabilizing debt without necessarily choking growth. But it is that growth that, Minister, many people want to know about, because the unemployment situation, that is something that is a huge bugbear for many South Africans. And, again, what tangibly in yesterday's budget would speak to the unemployment crisis in the country?
Let me caution this notion that the budget is a panacea. Once you table the budget will solve all your problems, will solve unemployment, will achieve growth, will do all of those sort of things. The budget can contribute, it's but one facet. It can contribute. This is how we're trying to attempt to do that in this budget. First, we're trying to achieve macroeconomic stability. Macroeconomic stability is a necessary but an insufficient condition for growth. But if you do not have macroeconomic stability and no fiscal prudence, you are not likely to achieve growth either. The third thing we're trying to do, we're trying to achieve structural reforms. Structural reforms are reforms which are intended to remove bottlenecks to the economy. In that sense, the work we've done on the electricity front, the work we're doing now on logistics, and the work we're doing in a variety of a number of areas. The third area, we're putting a lot of money on infrastructure. The key question we must make now, for instance, that this financial year 26-27, municipalities are going to be spending 69 billion rand on infrastructure. Provinces, 74 billion rand on infrastructure. I can't remember the national figure. Now, all of these numbers reflects that there's money that can be utilized. If utilized properly, it could stimulate growth.
And that, of course, is the key, spending the money effectively. But just before I go, and I didn't want to make it about just the SABC, because I sit at the SABC, Minister, but looking at the allocation, the communications minister saying he's encouraged by that 700 million rand that was allocated to his department. But with that, of course, looking at commitments like clearing the debt to Centec, which is over R1 billion. But the SABC, Minister, you would know, is also in dire need. The infrastructure at the SABC needs to be funded, among other things. So just in speaking to that, Minister, what is your take on the allocation for SABC? Although I know you did say the Minister will obviously speak to that.
What I'm doing at the moment is to attend to two issues which are urgent. One is avoid the liquidation of the post office. Secondly is to try to settle the Centec, SABC debt with Centec. The next phase during the course of the year is to attend to the SABC infrastructure, which has to be attended. I made that point during the budget speech that we will attend to this matter during the course of the year. Relax.
So it's going to be attended to in this year, 2026, Minister.
Yes.
Thank you, because I'm sure you've been to the SABC and you know that this is not just, a cry. It's not a vanity plea. There's real need here.
And your lips are horrible.
Thank you, Minister. And these are the things we are talking about. And I appreciate that you understand just how bad the situation is. Escalators are not working. The lifts are not working. It is a dire situation. But I'm glad to hear you say it will be attended to this year. But Minister, thank you so much for your time, as always. Minister of Finance, Enoch Godongwana, speaking to us post his 2026 national budget.